Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. It's certainly a pleasure for me to be here. It's very intimidating, I must say, to be amongst so many very smart and bright people, but also very much an honor for myself to try and contribute to the conversation this morning here in beautiful Montreal. Very grateful to Gael and Mathieu, the Casco and CDAI teams for the invitation to be here, and thanks for the efforts in putting this together. I'm certainly not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, so don't let the uniform intimidate you that I may be. I'm definitely not, but I think I bring to the conversation almost 36 years of experience in uniform at tactical, operational, and strategic decision tables. And I think I can bring that kind of perspective into what we're going to discuss over the next 2 days. I've been asked to talk about the strategic imperative for military adaptation, and I think I'll do that through 4 kind of main blocks. The first one would be why military adaptation is so important to the Alliance, on maintaining awareness in our commanders, our staff, and our forces, and then thirdly, what NATO and its allies are doing by way of adaptation, and then lastly, I'll outline some of the risks that I personally see, my own personal risks that I see when I've really thought about this. So first off, why is it so important? Since 2022, with the adoption of NATO's strategic concept, the Alliance has recognized climate change as a defining challenge of our time, with a profound impact on Allied security. And NATO's Climate Change and Security Action Plan includes goals for adapting militaries and reducing emissions. In the past couple of years, NATO has faced a profoundly challenging security environment while continuing to adapt its deterrence and defense posture to the challenge posed by Russia's aggression. NATO has also had to contend with impacts of accelerating climate change on security. 2024 and 2025 have been marked by more frequent and intense bouts of extreme heat, catastrophic floods across much of Central Europe and the Western Balkans, and devastating wildfires in the vast areas of the Mediterranean region. We have seen a rise in the use of nations' armed forces and also cooperation amongst nations in the combat against climate change. The Balkan region is of the utmost importance to my headquarters in Naples, Italy. Ensuring peace and security in this region means that Russia does not try to exploit any cracks of weakness. And this year, for example, Montenegro forces supported aerial suppression, evacuation logistics, and drone surveillance during wildfires. Oh, no problem. This is for me to lean on, I think, when I get too long-winded. No, that's okay. Sorry, where was I? Ensuring peace and security in this region means that Russia does not try to exploit any seams of weakness. Okay, thank you very much. And this year, Montenegro forces supported aerial suppression, evacuation logistics, and drone surveillance during wildfires in southern Albania in July of this summer. Croatia deployed its mountain rescue service teams, enhancing regional response time and effectiveness during flood disaster response operations. Slovenia received assistance from Bosnia-Herzegovina, North Macedonia, Croatia, and Serbia after severe flooding. Kosovo Force provided support to the institutions in Kosovo in the suppression of fires this year. And if there's any good that comes out of climate change, we also witnessed Serbian firefighters crossing the border and assisting Kosovo firefighters. Canada is all too accustomed to using the Canadian Armed Forces for disaster relief for wind, fire, floods, ice, and snow emergencies. I was in our Strategic Joint Staff in 2020 and 2021, and although compounded by COVID-19 at the time, we still responded to almost 50 requests for assistance from provinces and territories to help them with climate-related incidents. And that's a huge increase over the norm, where we would see less than 10. In addition, throughout these upheavals, NATO has demonstrated its unflinching resolve in ensuring that the alliance's posture remains fit for purpose in a rapidly changing environment, while at the same time reducing NATO allies' dependence on fossil fuel imports from Russia and adapting to the ongoing energy transition, including in the military. Let there be no doubt these effects are complex, non-linear, and co-evolving. They touch our citizens' lives, strain resilience within and outside NATO allies, and pose direct and indirect challenges to the fulfillment of NATO's core tasks, including the defense of the Euro-Atlantic region. In an operational headquarters like mine in Naples, NATO's primary focus is on vigilance and deterrence around the immediate dangers of conflict in Europe, addressing the accumulating effects of Russian aggression, new nuclear risks, and daily destabilization like cyber attack and supply chain disruptions. So our role across significant and diverse expanses of geography, seas, and regions brings a new form of vigilance in themes beyond just the immediate operational. We view climate change as a transnational challenge alongside terrorism and uneven global demographic change. In this sense, it is a priority because of its potential as a catalyst and amplifier in most areas of threat which we continue to monitor. The second theme I'll touch on is this: we need to maintain awareness and momentum behind climate understanding. There are now hardly any credible projections of security risk that do not place climate security among the most pressing issue of our generation. For NATO, in a volatile region with a high likelihood of crisis proliferation into 2026, we should normally expect to be surprised. But on climate issues, we should not. In the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report of 2025 on conflict and the environment, published earlier this year, environmental risks now dominate the 10-year horizon, led by extreme weather events, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem collapse. Extreme weather is recognized as the second most severe threat behind disinformation and in front of state-based armed conflict. Recent commentaries underline what is at stake. They are urging our nations to broaden the definition of alliance security to include risks like climate change, food insecurity, and energy shocks. They note that protecting communities from flooding, extreme heat, and sea level rise is as vital as deterring hostile armies. This perspective aligns with growing evidence that climate change acts as a threat multiplier, exacerbating crises such as conflicts over resources, mass displacement, and state fragility. Awareness helps us to understand the new operational challenges. NATO forces will need to operate in more extreme weather conditions and adapt accordingly. Climate change is not just a pervasive issue. Altering environments, straining societies, and indirectly stoking conflicts, it is also a direct concern in itself. That the implications of climate change include drought, soil erosion, famine, floods, loss of land and livelihood, all of which we see in our region, which can exacerbate state fragility, fuel conflicts, and lead to displacement and migration, creating conditions more exploitable by hostile actors. Turning to the third theme of what NATO and its allies are doing and thinking about ways of adaptation. Allies already agree that NATO needs an agile, resilient joint force capable of operating in contested and unpredictable environments. But climate instability is already reshaping those environments through floods, wildfires, food insecurity, water scarcity, and mass displacement. The battle is not over geography, it is over system resilience. To meet these challenges, our defense posture must be as bold and as adaptive as it can be. Powered by renewable energy instead of supply convoys, built on resilient home bases instead of fragile imports, and embedded within a defense industrial system that thrives under pressure rather than collapses under shock. In an overheating world, strategic advantage lies in preparation and foresight, in electrified logistics, in circular supply chains, in climate-proof installations, and integrated climate security intelligence. Joint Forces Command Naples will lead in this effort by charging forward on the use of green renewable energy. Our headquarters is already a state-of-the-art facility, backed by a mechanical plant that actually creates vast sheets of ice on a daily basis that we use to cool our water and cool our building. Our next step, beginning in January of 2026, we'll see us breaking ground on cover protection for all of the cars that we park in our parking lots outside. Not only will this structure provide shade to our cars from the Italian hot sun, but it will create electricity from the solar panels across the entire roof of its structure. In the MENA region, water and food stressors translate into direct security implications by shaping the operating environment for force protection, base resilience, and long-term partnerships. Security-driven instability can exacerbate conflict and strain host nation support for NATO operations, while also exposing bases and supply chains to risks from social unrest and environmental degradation. To address these potential challenges, NATO can deepen collaboration with MENA research organizations through mechanisms like the Science and Technology Organization and the Science for Peace and Security Program. NATO STO, for example, has a research subgroup that analyzes regional dynamics of climate security, including in Northern and Western Africa. This type of research could eventually result in evidence-based early warning and foresight that can inform both resilience strategies and NATO's operational planning. Additionally, MENA civilian organizations can participate along with their military counterparts in exercises coordinated by the Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordination Center. They have already engaged MENA partners such as Jordan, Iraq, Morocco, Mauritania, and Tunisia in disaster preparedness exercises, strengthening their ability to manage emergencies linked to climate and resource stress. By scaling up such collaborative initiatives, NATO can help develop solutions rather than reduce vulnerabilities to water and food insecurity in the MENA region, while simultaneously enhancing trust, stability, and peace in the region. We are also examining military operations and capabilities accordingly. There are several ways of responding to climate-related security threats, and some are embedded within broader capability plans. One clear area is adaptation in military operations in more extreme weather conditions. And this implies changes in training, the equipment we use, and the procedures followed to ensure joint forces can function effectively amid heat waves, floods, wildfires, storms, and other climate hazards, all of which we see across NATO's southern region. For instance, troops require appropriate protective gear for extreme heat or cold, and bases may need upgrades to withstand flooding or storms. The maritime component, such an important dimension in the Mediterranean, needs to prepare for new geographical realities with rising sea levels, adaptable port infrastructure and enablement, and appropriate crisis responses, including for disaster relief. This suggests strategic planning includes deploying assets quicker to disaster zones, a role likely to grow as climate-related disasters intensify, and importantly, making advanced preparations for extra capacity. And so there are wider changes that we could consider. To mainstream climate awareness across NATO, the Alliance could also broaden the training on climate security it offers, both by creating courses focused solely on climate security and by incorporating these issues into existing courses that we already have. We already have meteorological advisors, but perhaps we could envision climate effects advisors. If we intend to incorporate a climate perspective in the same way that we now include gender perspectives, then climate advisors could become a recognized input into all of our planning and the conduct of our operations. Exercises, war games, and simulations all present opportunities for incorporating climate-related events such as natural disasters and unexpected extreme temperatures. Both military leaders and forces from across NATO would benefit from a deeper understanding of how their range of activities, missions, and operations will be impacted by changing environments. Lastly, I will now touch a base on a few of the risks that I see moving forward. Climate change presents multifaceted risks to militaries by damaging physical infrastructure, disrupting supply chains and energy, increasing health and safety risks for personnel, and creating new sources of instability and conflict globally. Direct impacts include destruction of coastal installations by sea level rise and other assets by extreme weather, while indirect effects involve compromised energy supplies and resource competition that threaten operational readiness and effectiveness. Consequently, militaries must adopt proactive risk management to build resilience, enhance energy security, and maintain national security in the face of a changing environment. Negative climate trends threaten not only the physical resilience of installations and supply routes, but also operational flexibility, humanitarian mission effectiveness, and the strategic calculus of both state and non-state actors. More severe environmental hazards will challenge mobility and supply chains during crisis and conflict. It will impair force sustainment, especially in prolonged hot or flooded conditions. It will certainly put an increased demand for disaster response and civil protection missions by our armed forces. It will strain our water, energy, and communication systems at vulnerable bases. And for example, MENA's vulnerability is heightened because its militaries and critical infrastructure are often sited in climate-exposed, urbanizing, or resource-constrained locations. And to build on the increasing demand placed on our armed forces, as just mentioned, the armed forces of all allied nations will continue to adapt to climate change, and we will always do whatever we're asked to do by our governments. But there is a risk in over-reliance on our armed forces to constantly respond to climatic events facing our nations. The scale and frequency of climate disasters are now overwhelming many civilian response systems. Military forces with unmatched logistics, communications, and mobility assets are increasingly being tasked for disaster response, from rescuing flood victims to stabilizing power and water supplies to putting out fires. Militaries must balance the disaster response with their core defense readiness, as troop deployments for flood, storm, or wildfire relief can degrade preparations for other missions. For many nations, not all, but most, it is not our primary role. And it takes away valuable training time for our main purpose of deterring, defending, and securing our nations. In this unstable world, we are facing ever-increasing threats, and those threats are on our doorstep right now. Relying on armed forces to conduct disaster response, climatic-related operations reduces the readiness of the nation to respond to the looming threats from our adversaries. We must allow our armed forces to focus on their primary role while using other agencies where possible for disaster response. And where those agencies do not exist, then it is probably time to create them at the national level. Lastly, NATO and other allies are quickly rearming and recalibrating defense spending with a huge influx of billions of dollars into new capabilities and infrastructure. There is a race now to ensure that all of our nations are well set and clearly at an advantage over our adversary. As we move as fast as possible to rearm, it will be important to safeguard and remind ourselves of the many environmental and climate impacts that some of our acquisition decisions may make. We will have to strike a balance between the correct capability, the speed of acquisition, and protecting our planet. In closing, thank you for inviting me this morning to spend the last 15 minutes with you. I've greatly appreciated the discussions that I've had so far leading up to this address this morning. NATO is moving forward with climate change adaptation despite the wide range of threats that we face today and those on the horizon. In much of our work and understanding now, allies are showing new enthusiasm about the work that the Climate Change and Security Center of Excellence is doing to increase awareness and our understanding of climate security across the Alliance. It is important that the Center's work continues to be integrated throughout the organization, that climate security be elevated throughout all echelons, and that work on this issue continues to address the security challenges that we all face. Thanks very much for your time.